Okay, Salamat. Welcome to our panel session on careers in law, hosted by the Eritrean American Bar Association. We are a group of lawyers who have come together in an effort to empower one another and the communities that we are from. The mission of our organization is to network and support other Eritrean lawyers in their career development. It is also to mentor and guide aspiring lawyers in our community through our mentorship program and through events like this, and also to empower our communities with knowledge of their legal rights in the United States. So if you're interested in learning more about our organization or joining us, please reach out to us at our website, www.eraba.org. We'll put it in the chat. Our organization is inclusive and open to all Eritreans. Our organization does not engage in political activities in Eritrea, in part because there are many other organizations who are focused on that. So as you'll see today, there's a tremendous amount of talent and resources in our community that can empower all of us when we work together. So with that, I will turn it over to Temesgen Weldetsgen, who will be moderating today's panel session.
Okay. Thanks, Rahwa. Hello, everyone. My name is Temesgen Weldetsgen, and I will be moderating this discussion with our esteemed panelists. Let me just begin by providing you with a brief overview of our agenda for today's event. So first, each of the panelists will introduce themselves and provide a bit of background about their journey. We'll then take an informal poll to get a sense of where many of our attendees are with respect to their legal professional paths to make this discussion a bit more helpful for the audience. Following the poll, we'll move on to our questions and we'll conclude with a Q&A. So unless there's anything pressing from our other hosts or anyone would like to add anything before we begin, I think we can go ahead and start. Tamam. We'll move along to the poll now. So if you can, in the chat, please let us know which of the following most applies to you. Are you considering a path into the legal profession? Are you about to begin law school or the law school application process? Are you a current law student or a recent graduate, or are you an experienced attorney? If none of those apply to you, that's also fine. Just please give us a sense as to maybe how we can make this discussion a bit more helpful for you. I'll give you about a minute. Okay. I think it's been about a minute now, and I think we're getting a bit of a sense as to the makeup of the audience. It seems like many of those in our audience today are considering a legal career or have already begun their journey in law school. So I think we'll proceed with our questions. We have a lot of really great panelists today. Very, very impressive. And so I think we will begin by kind of all of the panelists introducing themselves, giving us a little bit of a background. So for each of the panelists, I'm going to ask where they were born, where they were raised, where they grew up, where they went to law school, where they graduated, and what their practice area was. So Samira, if you could kind of start us off and give us a little bit about your background.
Sure, happy to start. So I'm Samira Asfaha. I was born in Ethiopia. I moved with my family to Kenya when I was about 2, lived in Nairobi through middle school. Then we moved to Switzerland. I went to high school in Geneva. I came to DC for college as an international student. I went to GW. And while I was in college, I applied for asylum, and through that process decided that I wanted to be a lawyer. So I went to Howard for law school. I graduated in 2003, which means that I've been practicing law for almost 19 years now. Hard to believe. And now I work in the legal department of an international NGO called CARE. CARE's mission is to fight poverty and inequality, especially gender inequality around the world. And we have operations in almost 100 countries. As far as my practice area, I would define myself as a generalist, which means that because I work in a small legal department, I handle a range of different legal topics, from corporate and tax to employment and privacy, drafting contracts, managing litigation. So it's a mix of things, and it keeps it interesting.
Fantastic. Thank you, Samira. Sauron, if you could give us a bit of background.
Sure. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Sauron Tesfaye. I currently live in Sacramento, California. I was born in Sudan. I was there until I was about 3.5. Then my mother and I, we came to the United States. We actually came to the Bay Area, Oakland, California. I was raised in Santa Rosa, which is about 45 minutes to an hour north of San Francisco. I went to school in UC Berkeley right out of high school, but I dropped out and decided I just wasn't into going to school at the time, didn't want to go to college. A few years after dropping out, I joined the Navy, and then I served 4 years in San Diego. From there, I went to San Diego State College, and I transferred back to UC Berkeley. Got an undergraduate degree, African American Studies and English, double majored, and then went to UC Hastings in San Francisco. While I was at UC Hastings, I essentially went to law school, interested in just generally serving my community, being a lawyer, et cetera. Fell in love with criminal law. I got a concentration in criminal law while I was at UC Hastings, and then became a prosecutor. So part of that progressive wave of prosecution from 2012 to 2014, graduated law school, and have been working as a deputy prosecutor, deputy district attorney since then.
Fantastic. Thanks, Sauron. Rahel?
Hi, everyone. My name is Rahel Kifle. I live in Fairfax, Virginia, which is about 20-30 minutes from DC. I was born in a small town in southwestern Germany called Bretten. I jokingly refer to as that area as like I was born on the run, basically, as many of you probably experienced. My parents were refugees, and so they interestingly enough had, I think, myself and each of my siblings at different points along their journey. And so I was born in Germany on the way to the United States. I arrived in the US when I was 3. I was raised in Arlington, Virginia. I did my K-12 education in Arlington, which is about 5 minutes outside of DC. I did my undergraduate studies at the University of Virginia. I too double majored in African-American studies, as well as international affairs with a focus on Africa. From there, I went on to complete my law degree at the American University Washington College of Law, which is based in DC. I graduated in 2010. I too feel old, Samira, when I say that, how long I've been in practice, not as I haven't been as seasoned as you, but I've been hanging around for a while now. My background is primarily civil work. I did a lot of civil litigation, but now I am in-house counsel at alarm.com, which is a technology company based in Tysons Corner, Virginia.
Awesome. Thank you, Rahel. Marhawi?
Hi, everyone. So I'll just be real brief. I was born and raised mostly in California, and I went to undergraduate and grad school in Illinois and studied engineering. And after a career as an engineer, I decided to make the jump to law school. and studied law school in California at Santa Clara University. And ever since I was in law school, and actually before then, I was always interested in technology, and obviously my background as an engineer pushed me to go into intellectual property law. And so that's what I've been practicing for almost a decade now.
Great, thanks. Rahwa?
Hi, everyone. I was born in Connecticut, grew up in the Bay Area, California, near San Jose. Went to school in the East Bay. So I went to UC Berkeley, like Saron, both for college and for law school. When I graduated law school, I was a bit displaced by the recession, so I didn't end up practicing what I'm doing now for a few years, but for a good chunk of the 12 years, I guess, now that I've been out of law school, I spent as a renewable energy finance attorney. But now I work in-house at a tech company doing general sort of commercial work.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rahwa. Haragu?
Hi, everybody. My name is Haragu, and I was born in Eritrea in a village called Golagol, and then came to the States in '86 to the Bay Area. Been here most of my time. Went to Cal, like Saron and Rahwa, and then stayed locally for the most part and have been practicing immigration law since 2009.
Thanks, Haragu. Johannes?
Yeah, Johannes Hume. I live in Seattle. I was born in Portland, Oregon. Moved up to the Seattle area when I was a kid, so raised in Seattle. Graduated from Seattle University with a degree in political science, 2006. Went to DC at George Washington University for law school. Graduated in 2009. Since then, been practicing mostly in litigation. I had my own practice, opened my own business in 2012, and I've been focused more recently on nonprofits and small businesses owned by immigrants, in particular, like our people, like taxis, Ubers, transportation businesses.
Thanks, Johannes. So as you can see, we have a nice breadth and depth of experience here on our panel today. Given that our audience consists of many people who are considering a path in law or those who have already begun their path, legal practice is very broad, and the law touches almost every aspect of society, economy, politics even. And you can categorize the law in many different respects: civil, criminal, transactional, litigation. So I'm going to be asking the panelists now to give us a little bit of insight about their practice areas and a little bit about what their day-to-day looks like. So Saron, I'd like to begin with you. What do you do on a day-to-day? Give us a little bit of a sense about your practice area and what that actually involves.
Sure. So as a district attorney or as a prosecutor in general, no matter what state or wherever you're practicing, essentially what you do is you handle a criminal case from the day that it's filed all the way through trial, through sentencing. And if there's any appeals, you may or may not handle that as well. It depends on what state you're at and who handles appeals for your state, and also what type of appeal it is. But when you go to an actual prosecutor's office, all those are broken up into different divisions, units. So there's some attorneys who come in and 24/7 every day, they just file cases. So they read police reports. It could have been someone that was arrested yesterday, the day before, over the weekend, whatever. They'll read those police reports, decide, has that person committed a crime? And if so, what is the crime and what should be charged? And then once that's filed, it goes to a different unit in our office. That person might go do a settlement conference. They show up for the first day of court and say, hey, if your client wants to plead guilty, they'll speak to the defense attorneys. Or if they're interested in a resolution, this is what we'll offer. It could be probation, could be a prison sentence, just depends on the type of crime and what's going on. If that doesn't happen, then if it doesn't resolve at that stage, then it goes to a different attorney. So it's almost like an assembly line. Some units are more serious, so it'll be one attorney that handles the same case all the way from beginning to end. So for example, if you have homicides, sexual assaults, domestic violence, other serious crimes like that. It'll be the same attorney. We don't, most offices don't like to kind of hand it off to a new prosecutor every stage of the proceedings because, the victims have, they like to have some kind of consistency and just work with one person throughout the whole case. So currently I work in a unit, it's called Career Criminal Prosecution. Essentially, these are the most violent criminals, people that have numerous prior violent felonies, people that are usually facing 25 to life sentences, something to that effect. I specifically work in the auto theft unit, which is essentially carjackings and anything that comes with that. So if you have someone who commits a robbery and they're trying to flee, they punch someone's window out, drag them out of the car, take their car, go on a high-speed chase, get in a shootout with police, that would be type of case that I handle. So that's my day-to-day. I am every day in court. I wear a suit every single day. I either have usually settlement conferences or something could just pop up and I'll have to go run to court to appear on a case. I do trials. I do trials pretty regularly, but the more serious the case is, the longer it takes for a case to go to trial. So over the course of my career, which is a little over 7 years now, I've done about over 20 misdemeanor trials and about 10 or 11 felony trials. And they range from, DUIs, driving under the influence, all the way up to attempted murder. It just depends on the type of case, what unit I'm in, and so forth. But right now, my basic day-to-day is show up in the office about 8 a.m. First thing I do is go to the courthouse and go appear on whatever cases I have. Then I'll come back, try to work on my files, usually speak with investigators or detectives or victims. Sometimes I'll send out an investigator to go do some follow-up. And then in the afternoon, also have some court hearings, less in the afternoon than in the morning. And I would say probably a few times a month, I'll do what's called a preliminary hearing. That's a hearing in front of a judge where we basically present a cursory overview of the evidence to see if the judge agrees that the case should have been filed and that there's enough evidence to go to trial. And then with the current assignment I'm in, I'll probably do 3 to 4 trials per year just because of the length of the trials. Some of them may have 30, 40, 50 witnesses that I need to call. It might take several weeks. In other cases might just be a week-long trial with 5 or 6 witnesses.
Great. Thanks so much, Saron. Moving on to Samira, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a bit of a sense. I understand that you've had a bit of an interesting path. So if you could please give us a sense of the practice areas that you've practiced in and kind of your experiences there.
Sure. So unlike Saron, I don't go to court at all. I think I've only in my 19 years of practice had one case that ended up in litigation. My objective is to keep us out of court. And I started out as a corporate lawyer at a large law firm. So what that means is basically we would work on a team. We'd be put on a deal team, and the team would consist of lawyers at different stages of their career, different levels of expertise, and different topics, right? Like someone was a corporate lawyer, a tax lawyer, a real estate lawyer, and we would we'd help our clients to close on a big corporate transaction, either a merger, an acquisition, financing. So that's what I did the first part of my career. And then I went in-house. And in-house, as I mentioned, especially now at CARE, I do a whole range of different things. So I don't really have a typical day, but I would say I can give you a few examples. I mean, my day usually starts by me skimming through some legal news feeds I subscribe to, so I can keep up to date on new laws or new cases that might impact our work. And then I'll have a lot of calls with my clients, my internal clients. So for example, I might speak to HR about a difficult employee who's not performing well or who's engaged in some misconduct, but has now turned around and said that the organization is discriminating against him or her. So I'll strategize with HR, probably work on some talking points, see if there's anything that the organization does need to look into, whether the allegations are warranted. so that's sort of an example of the advice and counsel kind of on a day-to-day basis. Review contracts, for example, for our fundraising team, if they are working with a corporation like the Body Shop that wants to give us a portion of their proceeds, that we have quite a few arrangements like that, but we review the contract to make sure that the terms are consistent with US tax laws, so we don't jeopardize our nonprofit status. I worked sometimes if my internal clients want to do something, push the envelope, something innovative, we look at our policies to make sure that they can do it. What is the risk there, and just kind of brainstorm with them and help them think through risk. For example, our innovation team recently has started a pilot project where they are distributing cryptocurrency to refugees in Kenya, and they have worked on a mechanism to allow them to switch to exchange the cryptocurrency for food and household goods. And so that was something new for us. We looked at our policies. I helped them draft a policy to make sure that we have internal controls on that. We have the right people, we have checks and balances and so on. So those are the types of things I do. And then, always in between meetings, tackle my ever-growing inbox and respond to one-off questions here and there. But that's a pretty typical day for me.
I'll see you. Okay, and Johannes, if you wouldn't mind, just give us a little bit about your day-to-day.
Yeah, and I'll keep it very brief. I think it's really good that we heard from Saron and Samira, because you can see the difference between a criminal lawyer that goes to court hearing almost a lot of times in court every day and someone that doesn't go to court at all. I guess I'm somewhere in between because I'm a civil lawyer. I do lawsuits, I do go to court, but it's much less often than, let's say, a criminal lawyer, which is something you might see more on TV. So the type of cases, we did, when I started off, the first few months, I think we did 3 civil trials in 4 months right out of law school. So I got that experience. And it's much more sporadic after that. It could be a trial on car accidents. It could be a trial on civil rights, where we kind of started, or business. So the civil law covers a lot. It's basically when people are suing each other for money. That's the most common thing that I'm sort of dealing with. I also run my own business. So I have my own firm, and a lot of attorneys, I think it's close to half in Washington, have small firms. So it's basically 2 jobs. Like, you have a case, you have a client, you are a lawyer, and then you also have a business. So you deal with everything that a business deals with: human resources, your employees, your marketing, your bookkeeping. It's a second job. That's the way I describe it. But I love it. I love it because you don't have a boss. Sky's the limit as far as how much you can make. Even if you make less than someone at a big firm, you have the ability at some point to build it into something that is, but where again, sky is the limit. Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I'll just kind of leave it there. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Johannes. Harabu?
Yes. And for me, I'm a combination of all 3. I own my own practice. I've been practicing immigration law for the last 12 years. And so my day-to-day is running my business, but I'm also a practicing attorney. I'm in court all the time. So most of my day is spending trying to prepare my client for court, and then negotiating with the court, not with the court. I don't have direct access to the court at all without opposing counsel, but trying to negotiate with the government attorney, trying to see where we can settle some things, where we can get rid of certain issues. And that takes a lot of the time. But because I deal with clients that need to go to court consistently, and that's brand new to them, a lot of my time is also just preparing clients for court. So that is my day-to-day most of the time.
Thanks so much. So one question that I want to pose to the panelists here. Legal practice is inherently stressful, and the journey is not easy either. So I'd like to ask, what mental health tools and strategies have helped you throughout your journey as a law student, when you were a law student, as a practicing attorney, and how do you find balance in your life? So Johannes, if you could start us off with that.
Okay, yeah, I'll get into it. So, I mean, everyone's different, obviously, and I think everyone understands the importance. Sorry, there's some backfeed. The importance of mental health. It comes up in every career, but this one is in particular a very stressful career. So, in times you have to weigh that. And so, what I've done personally in the last few years, in particular, is meditation, and helped me quite a bit. And to calm down is these apps that I use, which I'm more than willing to share. A couple of them are daily routine. I get up and turn them on. A couple of them are more Christian-based, faith-based. A couple of them are just regular, fundamental apps for meditation. And again, to explain the importance of it, like if you study your brain functions and your mental health, there's something that most people have heard of called the fight or flight. So under whatever stress, let's say a deadline in a case or an angry client, your mind, I guess your prehistoric mind would think, well, that's almost like taking my ability to survive or my job. It's almost like a lion or something gonna kill me. So you have a prehistoric mind that goes into intense tension and may not act reasonably. And over time that will kill you and take your joy away. So there's mechanisms you can use with these apps to help you focus, to breathe, to calm down your system, so that emergencies that seem life-threatening really aren't. It lets you get through your day and just live, your life. Again, I know we're a little constrained on time, so I'm willing to share some of the apps that I use, every morning, and it's done wonders for me, and I hope it'll help others as well.
Thanks, Johannes. Samira.
So Tomaskin, I can speak to one thing on the work-life balance front, which is when I have two children, a 13-year-old and an almost 15-year-old boy now. And when I first started practicing, I was really concerned about my ability to be a good lawyer and to be there for them and be a good mom as well. And it wasn't easy when they were young, but and we also have a lot of extended family. My parents live in the area. My husband's parents live in the area. And while it's great, that all takes time. And sometimes there is a clash between the expectations at a large law firm and the expectations that our families had on us. And I would say, we've managed and had, I think, I would say there's three things that that helped me. One was looking out for other women who had demanding jobs and were raising young children as well. Just having mentors and having examples around me really helped. The other was focusing on the most important things. So I had some non-negotiables, like I tried to make it home for dinner every night, and we still more or less eat dinner together every night. When I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do that at a law firm, I actually switched jobs and went in-house. I also now take time to go for a walk. I think I walk 3 to 4 times a week, and that's my me time. And letting go, I think, of some standards. We eat together, but it doesn't mean that I cook every day. So there's definitely not, just being okay with some things not being at the standard. Like I am not going to cook like my mother or my grandmother. That's not happening. But we're together, and so just focusing on some of the most important things, I think, have really helped with work-life balance.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're fortunate enough to have many in the audience who are considering joining the legal profession and current law students. Rahel, if you would not mind giving us a bit of a sense as to what the path looks like from being an undergraduate to becoming a licensed attorney.
So I wanted to preface my response by saying there's no one-size-fits-all approach to going to law school. There are many different paths. So I'll be speaking to the general steps that most people take to go to law school, and I'll be weaving in my own experience as well in answering the question. So you would first start with completing your four-year degree, your undergraduate studies. There's no prerequisite courses or specific majors that you have to declare. in order to pursue a law school, in order to pursue a legal career. You don't have to major in pre-law, something I didn't know. In fact, most universities don't even offer that these days, I understand. But that's actually a good thing because you get to really maximize your intellectual curiosity, pursue different disciplines that'll probably serve you well as a lawyer anyway. I know certain people on the panel, like Madhawi, for example, has an engineering background, and he was able to leverage that in becoming an IP lawyer. So that's highly encouraged. Definitely, use that to your advantage in declaring a major. With that being said, most people do tend to select a major in the humanities or liberal arts. So political science or government, philosophy, English, history, economics, those are all examples of the majors that would ordinarily people would take to law school. And the advantage to going that route is that you'll likely be performing a lot of research, reading, writing. These are all staples for the law school experience. You'll learn to think critically and how to use logic to support your idea. So those are all advantageous skills to have practiced before law school. For myself personally, I double majored, as I mentioned, in international affairs and African American studies. My international affairs degree in particular was useful in preparing me for law school. I was able to study systems of government domestically and internationally and understand how politics influences legislation that's passed, for example. It was also useful to me because I did intend to do human rights law oriented work. So I was able to arrange my coursework around that interest accordingly. Some other steps that I did as an undergrad before entering law school that could be helpful to share are I used my summers to build my resume. So I took on, I wasn't connected. I didn't know lawyers, so I wasn't able to, land any glamorous internships, but I got my foot in the door by offering myself up as an administrative assistant, office manager, whatever I could do to get into those legal settings and get exposure to legal issues. So I took on those administrative roles in well-established law firms, at a governor's office. I was working at the local prosecutor's office. That's probably as far as I got in terms of a traditional internship. But those were useful in just allowing me to discern whether law was really for me. And after I obtained my degree, so the path you can take after you get your BA, BS, whatever degree you obtain is you can either take time off, a gap year or longer, to obtain practical real world experience, preferably in the legal field if that's your pursuit, or you can go straight to law school. I personally went straight to law school because I didn't have a tremendous affinity for being a student. So I just wanted to get it over with. I wanted to go straight. I was afraid that I wouldn't return if I took a gap year. So I went straight. I know others who did differently and were just fine. So no way is best. Before you go to law school, you'll have to sit for an exam. I think that's still a prerequisite. I know there was some change around that, so I'm not sure. But typically you'll have to sit for an LSAT exam. During your third year of college, you would take an LSAT prep course. I took it the summer before my fourth year in college. And then I sat for the exam itself in August, and then again that fall of my fourth year, so that I could boost my score similar to the SATs. I applied for law schools that fall of my fourth year. I was accepted that spring. And then by the fall following my undergrad graduation, I was enrolled in law school. And law school itself is a 3-year journey. Most schools have certain core classes they want you to take, like contracts, constitutional law, criminal law, property law. Once I got those basics out of the way, I was able to really delve into what I wanted to do. I took a lot of international law classes. I also signed up for a clinical program, which enabled me to essentially serve as like a mini lawyer under the guidance and supervision of a licensed practitioner, which was really, really fantastic experience. I would highly recommend that for those of you that are enrolled in law school. Those are actually some of the highlights of my career. I was able to represent an individual in Guantanamo Bay and successfully advocate for his release and resettlement. I was able to represent an Arlington Immigration Court, an Ethiopian asylee, and obtain his asylum status. So those are tremendous highlights that boosted my confidence as a budding attorney before I even took the bar exam. So I would absolutely recommend that, as well as law review. That positioned me pretty competitively post-grad when I was interviewing and looking for a job. I also took advantage of the fact that I was based in DC, so I was often doing internships and things with local judges. So that was my law school experience. And after law school, I sat for the bar exam that summer, the August following my graduation in May. And then thank goodness I passed and was licensed that December. So that's typically the path that people take from undergrad to law school and becoming a licensed attorney. With that being the case, Temesgen, can I actually turn the mic over to you? I know you're a recent graduate or relatively recent graduate from law school. So if you have anything to add there that could be useful, it'd be great to hear from you.
Oh, no, I think that was a fantastic overview. The only thing I might add is that the LSAT is, for some institutions, is no longer a requirement for entry. So you should check the requirements for all of the schools and see if maybe if you're considering other graduate programs, if you like to take the GRE, for example, and the law schools that you're interested in are willing to accept a GRE score. But in the interest of time, so financing legal education is a challenge for many prospective students and can often involve taking on a significant amount of debt. So one question many, if not most, prospective students ask is, will I be financially stable if I become a lawyer? Or how do I finance law school, and how will that impact my financial stability in the future, if at all? So Saron, I'd like to begin with you. If you could kind of give us your thoughts on these questions, I would really appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. So law school is extremely expensive. The average law school tuition, annual tuition, annual tuition could be anywhere from like 40 to 60,000. That means you're paying 20 to 30,000 per semester. You definitely have to have a plan. You can't just jump into law school and say, oh, I'll just take loans and just make it through with the loans. Those will stack up very quickly. And unlike undergrad, where if you go to a lot of private schools, for example, say if your parents make less than 100,000, we're going to find a way for you to get through without any loans. Law school is not like that. They look at law school as you already have the ability to get a career and a job. Now you just want more. We're going to charge you for it, basically. So definitely have a plan. I was fortunate enough to I had the GI Bill. So the GI Bill covered 2 years of my undergrad. So I basically got out undergrad without much loans. I think I had maybe some under $20,000 in loans total in undergrad. Then when I went to law school, it covered 2 years of the law school, but not the third year. So there was 1 year I had to take loans to cover the third year of law school. In any event, that being said, I was fortunate enough to graduate with law school with just about 100,000 loans total, a little over 100,000, maybe 120, but that's undergrad and law school, et cetera. Other folks that I know who took loans all through undergrad and through law school, they graduated from law school and they have like $400,000 in loans. It's insane. You're going to be paying for the rest of your life. You probably won't be able to buy a house, or if you do, it's not going to be the house you want to live in. I mean, there's a statement or a saying they have, which is don't live like a lawyer while you're in law school, because you'll be living like a broke law student once you're a lawyer, So it's like you have to have a plan for that. I think, joining the military to get the GI Bill, that's a great plan, but it's also extreme. A lot of people don't need to do that. I actually wanted to go to the military anyway. I could care less about, whether I was going to use the GI Bill or not. I just wanted to do something new in life. But I would recommend, number one, before you graduate, so during your third year, make sure you sit down with a financial advisor and figure out all the programs that are available to you. If you go into criminal law, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be working for a public defender or a prosecutor or district attorney's office. With those, you'll qualify for the public service loan forgiveness program. That's based on your income. So you'll do basically like an income-driven repayment. So I graduated law school, and my first year as an attorney, I basically had to work for free. I had a stipend, but I only got $30,000 for my first year. But because I met with a financial advisor in my third year of law school, he had me apply and get into that public service loan forgiveness program. So then when they calculated based on my income, they said, okay, based on this income, you can afford $0. So your monthly payments are $0 for this year. And every year they recheck your income and recalculate. So my first 2 years out of law school, I paid $0 towards my loans, but it counted towards this 10 years of loan payments that I have to make to get my loans wiped out. So I was fortunate enough to, I had some good mentors in law school, and they just basically were like, hey, you need to do this, you need to do that. I'm very checklist oriented, and that's what I did. So now I'm in a position where, I still pay, thank you, pandemic, for freezing all loans right now. So I haven't actually paid, but even though I'm not paying, this is counting towards those 10 years that I have to go through to get my loans wiped out. So my first 2 years, I didn't pay anything, but it counted towards that 10 years. And now I've got about 2.5 years left, and I'll have all of my loans wiped out. And just full disclosure, so everybody knows, I have about $150,000 in loans now. That's not because I took more loans, but it's because my payment has been so low because my income is it doesn't even cover the interest. So there's interest building on top of interest. So I'm not paying anything towards principal. So that's why it's grown so much. So that's it, unless anyone else has any other questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Saron. Harobu?
And I didn't go to the military, and that wouldn't be my recommendation for anyone, but my recommendation would be, like Saron said, I piggyback that it can be very, very, very expensive and highly daunting, especially for persons like myself. I grew up in a family where we were taught that debt was bad. And so I had over $200,000, actually paid it off within 4 to 5 years because that was my mission. But when I say that, at one point I paid $22,000 at once. And that's because I didn't do anything. And it was very daunting, to say the very least. And so what I discovered, and I was having this conversation with Rahwa, what I discovered is people know ways to minimize loans or to, find ways to get your law school, and especially undergrad, more for undergrad. There's more scholarships and opportunities for undergrad and less so for grad school. But nonetheless, there's still programs, there are programs for women, programs for first-time graduate students, first-time anything. I mean, Oprah does something, Coca-Cola does something. I remember, and I've been out of undergrad since 01 and out of law school 06. So I know this is really old information, but there was an scholarship.com where it told you ways to find scholarship. And you can, if you're willing to sit, write, research, there's ways to find funding for even graduate school. So I would say look into it. And if the question is, will I be stable? Yeah, I think you can be, having this job, you can be, but it all depends on what you do and how you do and how you save. What you really have to think about the steps it takes to go through law school, how to pay for it. And that's an important conversation that I don't think we as a family, at least for my family, didn't have. All I knew was I was going to go to law school, but there was no discussion about how do I pay for it? Where do I get the money? It was an assumption that eventually I'll get a job and pay for it. Also, I just didn't know what $200,000 was when I was an undergrad. That's a huge lump sum of money that's difficult to comprehend if you don't, know the value and the cost of money. So I'd say sit with your family, sit with a trusted friend, analyze what options are there, and don't feel like you have to take all of it on your own. And yes, you can be and will be very stable with a job in law.
Thanks, Harobu. Rahwa, do you have?
Yeah, I was just gonna add one quick thing. I completely agree with everything Saron and Harobu just said. And I'm gonna make a shameless plug for our organization, but really any other, lawyer. I mean, a lot of us don't have lawyers in our families and in our personal networks, and we had to create these networks. That's essentially what we're trying to do here. And through this network, we can connect you with people that can give advice, more detailed advice on how to finance your education, how to be strategic, just one quick story. When I was admitted to the law school, to Berkeley, it was my top choice. There were a number of other students who were admitted who also, it was their top choice, but they strategically applied to schools that were in the same sort of tier or ranking, so that they could get a better scholarship package from those schools, and then go to Berkeley and say, well, I would love to go to your school, but Michigan's offering me 80%. Can you match that? Some schools have official matching programs, some have unofficial matching programs. So reach out to us. We could definitely share, the things we wish we knew at the time that, we were applying for law school. But there are ways to kind of mitigate the debt load early on.
Great. Thanks so much, Rahwa. Okay, so what advice would you give? This question is directed first at Marhawi. What advice would you give yourself as a new lawyer?
Well, so I know we're running a bit short on time, so I'll just get to, I have a few things that I really wish I had heard. I got a lot of advice going into law school from friends, family, and from a couple lawyers. But I think for me, the most important thing is not just, do well in school, focus on everything that you need to, but it's also to protect your own mental health. I think all of us have learned during the pandemic that is so critical for all of us. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier. Johannes and Samira talking about the apps and walks that they take, which are really helpful, but you need to take active measures to protect that, because law school and the legal experience, particularly early in your career, can be very caustic. There are good people and there are some that are not as we'll say pleasant. But everyone's there trying to be their best self. So do that for yourself and separate the aspects of your life so that you can do that. Particularly while in law school, it will be a very challenging time for you. You want to make sure your family knows that you're prepared for that. So just be ready for that aspect. But, and again, shameless plug for our organization notwithstanding, find a great mentor, either in law school, before law school, all of the above, after law school, that's what we're here for, or a group of mentors. I had the privilege of having many excellent mentors, and they really helped me develop as an attorney. I think I'm a pretty good attorney now, and I would not be at the level that I am now if it were not for the influence of my mentors. So I think that's really important, and they will help you grow into your path. I think those are the most critical points that I wish I had known before I went into law school. It would have made some lessons easier learned.
Thanks, Marhawi. That was very helpful. Rahwa, can we?
Yeah, no, I think that's all great advice. I unfortunately, I guess, graduated into the recession, and I had, a fancy job offer, and that was rescinded. And some of you, who are just considering law school or graduating now or graduating into a healthy economy, you never know what could happen, right? I've already seen in this last 12 years, 2 pretty significant recessions. People get cut, and you have to have contingency plans, not only for that, but if you want to switch careers, if you want to know what's work like at Apple, what's work like, owning your own, firm, just to have insight into what people are doing requires networking. And I, by nature, was always a shy person. I always shied away from, talking to people after an event and getting a card or getting, contact information. And so I learned the hard way when my job offer was rescinded, that I had very few attorneys who I could pick up the phone and call and say, hey, do you have a job? And so start doing that as early as you can. Get a LinkedIn profile, do whatever you need to kind of keep track of your contacts, but really don't underestimate the value of knowing people. Sometimes it's as important as what you know and what you can do, right? So it's very important to build your network in however way makes sense to you, but be proactive about it. And the other piece of advice that I would give myself, and maybe not a lot of people can relate to it, but my first year at a law firm, was very challenging. It's you know, a very intense environment. You have to dot all your I's, cross all your T's, and you make a mistake, and it could be demoralizing if you're working with people who come down hard on you, which was the case for me. But so I would tell myself to don't say you're sorry and to be more forgiving. When you're a junior, especially, you know, it takes time to learn. Everything is new. Once you've learned it, then you know it, right? I would see some of my colleagues kind of approach, mistakes in a very different way. They would say, "Oh, right, of course, of course I knew that," or "I'll fix that, no big deal." Comme dit Shella Liblu, right? And me, I would say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have done that." When you apologize a lot, you sort of create doubt around you, right? The people who are working with you doubt you, and then you internalize that. You start to doubt yourself. And so, what I would say was a line that my mentor told me, that one of the keys to being a successful lawyer is that you may often be wrong, but never be in doubt. So that's what I would say to my younger self.
Thank you both. That was very helpful. So lastly, on a happier note, I think one thing, given all of the stresses and everything that we discussed here in this panel, being a lawyer can also be rewarding. So Rahel, I want to ask, what do you find most rewarding about being a lawyer?
Thanks for the question, Temesgen. There are two things. In the interest of time, I'll try to speak very quickly about what I find most rewarding. I love that I'm always learning. As you mentioned, Temesgen, earlier in our panel discussion, the law intersects with almost every aspect of society, and it's always evolving to address, the different needs and priorities of society at any given time. So we're always having to be students of our craft. We're always having to keep abreast of changing trends in the law. I see this with technology now that I'm in the tech sector. We have an unprecedented accumulation of personal data based on the devices that we use, the software, the apps, many of which are designed to harvest that personal data. So lawyers are oftentimes at the forefront of protecting those privacy rights, or if you're on the business side like I am, you're trying to get as close to that line without crossing it. So it just teaches you to not only be a student of your craft, but a student of the industries that the laws govern. And so without, my legal background, I don't know that I'd be so immersed in the tech sector now. That wasn't my background. So it's really cool to kind of introduce a new area of study to my everyday life. The other aspect of law that I really enjoy is the empowerment. And I don't mean that in any sort of arrogant sense. I mean it actually as a tool of service to the community. I know that you all can probably identify my fellow panelists in that we didn't grow up with a lot of connections in the field. That's why so many of us are emphasizing networking. But I love the sense of empowerment that I get in being able to be that resource for my community, being an informational resource, being able to refer people to different lawyers that I know, educating my community on their rights that they may not have even known that they had, telling them sort of like what's next steps that they can take. So, and even just the representation, the visibility, right, of having someone like you sit at these tables and what that does for your psyche as someone who's still in school or an undergrad. So that's exactly what this organization is designed to do. We have the privilege and opportunity of giving back by, giving that advice and that, or not advice, excuse me, giving the informational resources to our community who's been historically underserved and lacked meaningful access to counsel. So those would be my two highlights for what's gratifying about our career.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Harugu, do you have anything to add to that, just briefly?
Similarly, I love my job because 90 to 95% of my clients are Eritrean, and I think I didn't know what I wanted to do in law, but I knew that I wanted to work with the community, and this gives me direct access. And when Rahel was saying it was empowering and powerful, just to have the access to be able to negotiate what you can give someone, and being present, understanding the language, being available, understanding cultural, just being at the table and understanding the nuances of naming. That's one of the most difficult things that people have, because how we name people here and names in Eritrea, that's so different. All of that is empowering even to myself. Like, I think it's great to be there and have this position. And so I really like what I do, for the most part.
Thank you so much, Harugu. And thank you so much to all of our panelists here. I think this was incredibly inspiring for myself, and I'm sure to many in the audience. So I think now we're going to close. But many of us are going to hang out here for a second if you have any other questions. As being a more recent graduate from the law school, I'm also happy to answer any individual questions about tips on how to be successful in law school and kind of a little bit more specifically what it looks like shortly thereafter. But in any case, if you're a lawyer interested in networking with other Eritrean attorneys or joining our mentorship program that many of our panelists made shameless plugs for, no shame at all. I wish I had such a program to access when I was a law student, or interested in learning more about our upcoming events or legal rights, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us or visit our page at www.eraba.org. Rahul just put it there in the chat, which is much more efficient than me reading it and you writing it down. I guess that's it. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you so much again to our panelists. A few of our panelists are going to drop in their LinkedIn bios or contact information into the chat. So feel free to reach out if you'd like.
Temesgen, I think we have 2 questions already in the chat.
Yeah.
I noticed the one question from Almaz on racism. I can answer that one if you want.
Okay, sure. Everyone, have at it.
One thought I had was, well, the question about whether we experience it. I think I would be very surprised if anybody says they've never experienced it. But one thing that has helped me when I first joined a large law firm, well, firstly, I went to Howard. So I felt like I had, I knew a lot of lawyers who looked like me, who graduated at the same time, and alumni. So I had that network. I think Howard prepared me very well for what it would be like when we graduated. We got a lot of advice from our professors and from fellow students to say, you're in a little bit of a bubble here, but expect something different when you leave. And so it wasn't a huge shock to me. I was ready. And then once I graduated and I joined a law firm, we had an African American network, an affinity group, which I joined and I was very active in. The partners at the firm definitely helped me. They were, again, you've heard us speak on this call a lot about mentorship. They were my mentors. They told me things that I would never have known otherwise in terms of picking a practice area, selecting work. They also helped me process my performance reviews when I got them. They can sometimes sting, right? As Rahwa said, it's a demanding environment and people are very direct and will point out your mistakes. But so I think, and even, you know, in the other positions I've had after the law firm, I've always, I've always looked out and tried to make connections with other people who look like me. And sometimes it really helps to work things, to have someone to talk about, and also, and if you can, to look for not just mentors, but sponsors. So people more senior than you can help you navigate the internal politics of the place you're in.
Great. Thanks so much, Samira. That was really helpful. I'm just, I know some of our speakers have to jump. That's okay. So I see we have another question about looking for internships in the law. I guess that also depends. I can go ahead and answer that since I'm okay, great. So I'd say the answer really depends on what stage you are in your path, whether if you're a current law student or if you are if you're interested in going to law school and would like to get a sense. depending on the type of practice that you want to go into, it wouldn't be a bad idea to get some substantive experience at perhaps a law firm that practices in the area that you're most interested in, so that you can actually confirm to yourself that you're still interested in actual practice rather than just the theory. And even during law school, the law in many ways, not to get too philosophical, is very much a language and a culture rather than just a set of rules. So kind of getting yourself acclimated and understanding how to think as a lawyer is a very important skill that unfortunately people tell you that you can't prepare for law school, but I don't think that's necessarily true. Kind of being in those spaces and developing some sort of fluency in legalese or just in the professional culture, I think is also really important. While you are a law student, and it depends on the institution, but after your first year, you do have an opportunity to do a summer internship before. Many schools do this on-campus interview process if you intend to go to private practice or one of the major law firms that come and do interviews after your first year. Use your career services as much as you can, but also it's important to know what questions to ask. Look at other people's resumes who were successful, and also don't beat yourself up and just compare yourself to other students about what it is, like what types of internships they're getting, and then trying to compete in that respect. You have your own path, but at the same time, it's really important to be prepared. And that being said, and again, another shameless plug about the mentorship program, depending on where you are, I would think about getting multiple mentors at different stages. So for example, if you are a first-year law student, get a mentor who is a second year or a third year law student who's gone through the interview process and can help you out with that. Somebody who is a more junior attorney and somebody who's like a more experienced attorney, and then kind of get their feedback. But you have to ask the right questions too. Like, what did you wish that you knew when you were at my stage, or how did you navigate this? And when you ask those targeted questions and tell them about your situation, they should be able to give you some good advice. But unfortunately, not everybody, they'll just because someone is successful doesn't necessarily mean they're a good mentor. So it's kind of like dating. You kind of have to pick and choose. So, but yeah.
Temesgen, if I can add to this in terms of the internship, is that depending if you're an undergrad and especially if you're in law school, there's a lot of organizations. I know Saron and I belong to a few, and I belong to Charles Houston. There's a lot of people in there who are willing to be mentors and are able to provide internships because of their positions at the employment positions that they have. And the other thing is, although you have to pay to be a member for undergraduate students and especially law school students, it's free membership. And so they provided a lot of opportunities. First of all, they provide a depth of types of attorneys in different fields. So you can actually, speak to different people, and you will have access to them. But the second thing is they do offer internships. I know that when I was at USF, I'm local in the San Francisco area, we had alumni come. They would plug their jobs, they would plug their organizations. I, like Rahwa, didn't feel comfortable enough to walk up to them and ask for anything, and therefore I was limited in what I did. But now that I'm a member of those different organizations, I know about how available they can be if I went to them. So you have to make the first step. But once you make that step, there'll be doors open to you.
Great points. Yeah, definitely. The Black Law Students Association at your institution will probably be your best friend, to be honest. We got another question about LSAT preparation. I think I'm happy to take this.
I just got one tip for that. I actually took an LSAT prep course. It was a little pricey. I think it was about maybe $1,100 or $1,200. but it raised my score 12 points. So if you're struggling, I mean, I was smart. I had straight A's at UC Berkeley, but I was getting a 145 on the LSAT, you know? So if you're really struggling with the LSAT, make a plan to take a course. Sometimes they're about anywhere from 2 to 3 months immediately before you take the LSAT. So if you have an LSAT in June, try to take the course in like April or so. And that could be a huge, well, it worked for me. So think about that. I know it's tough to cough up that much money, but if it's going to raise your score over 10 points, it might be worth it.
I think those courses, if I can just chime in, are really worth it. But also consider that the institutions that you're applying to will likely balance your LSAT score with your GPA, with also just who you are as a person. So if you find yourself that maybe you wish that you had a higher LSAT score or a higher GPA, then you may want to also focus on, you know, the assets that you do have. And, you know, oftentimes when you're applying, it can be really daunting and people can say, well, this school does not accept people that have a score of this high, or my GPA is too low, I will never get into the school. Like, don't just apply to the schools that you are most interested in and that you really like, and you'll probably be surprised. Just make sure that you know, you get feedback as much as possible, especially when it comes to your personal statement, because many institutions actually, that's the first thing that they'll look at is your personal statement and not even your numbers. We have another question.
There's a question about ranking.
Rankings. Does anybody want to talk about that?
I can talk about that. I went to a low ranking law school and a high ranking undergrad. I went to UC Berkeley, which is one of the #1 public universities. And then I went to USF, which is not highly ranked. No one really asks me about those that much so far in. Immediately, maybe that might be a question, but the greatest thing, and everybody has repeated it, is networking. No matter what institution you're at, your institution will assist you in getting a job. And I will plug Howard, even though I didn't graduate there. I went there for a semester, best semester ever. I love that institution. They have the best networking program. And so it is not high ranked in a national institution, but in terms of job opportunity, their placement is amazing. So, you know.
If I could add in here as well, Samira, if you'd like to go instead. The one thing I would add, I too went to a well-ranked undergrad and grad school actually, but lesser ranked nationally law school. But there's a few other considerations that went into my decision to choose that law school. And one is particularly for certain fields, the regional ranking of that law school is actually fairly important. So for example, I wanted to practice intellectual property law in the Bay Area. As a technologist, that was something I was very interested in. So for me, it was a higher priority to go to a lower ranked school that in the Bay Area that was well ranked for intellectual property law than another school that might have been globally or nationally higher ranked. So I would also think, you know, what do you want to do after law school, which of course might change throughout law school, but put that into the hopper for how you make your decision. Also, just the field that you're going in or the type of attorney you want to be. I would imagine that people in big law are more likely to care about the national ranking of your school. Some big law firms only hire from certain schools, for example. But if you don't particularly care which specific firm you go to, that might not be a consideration. It really, you have to look at what you want to end up doing and then almost backtrack from there, at least in my opinion.
If I can add to what Howie just mentioned, I think those are great points. I was going to mention the regional aspect or like your practice area, because that was a big driver for me choosing American University, wanting to do international human rights law. You very aptly pointed out that that may change, which it did for me. So I ended up going to a highly ranked human rights or international law school, but didn't end up practicing that. But some other things to consider are your geographical location. That may play a significant role into what types of internships or externships you're able to take on during the course of your school year. For me, it was really beneficial to be based within DC, and perhaps some of the judicial internships or other opportunities that I was able to avail myself of would not have been available if I had applied during the most competitive seasons with everyone else across the country during summer. But I was able to take advantage of, those opportunities being available during the off season, during my fall and spring semesters when half the country would be competing against me. So consider that as well, and how those opportunities may position you for future employment. The other thing that I would emphasize is the financial aid package that you receive. I know that's not maybe as influential in your undergraduate decisions, but I think it can be truly life-altering at the graduate level when it comes to law school. Private institutions versus public institutions, or the more expensive ones versus the ones who will offer you a scholarship, will really influence what types of positions of employment you'll be able to take post-graduation. So I just wanted to highlight that as well as a consideration.
Thanks. Does anyone have anything else to add in that respect? Great.
Actually, I'll add one thing really quickly. See what type of programs. Sometimes there's specific programs for, it could be like extra tutoring, extra whatever for people who are first generation college graduates, law school students, etc. That was my decision to go to UC Hastings. There's a program called the Legal Education Opportunity Program. We had, like a summer course before law school started, like a few weeks, where we did training. We got basically taught how to do legal analysis and all that. It's actually the same program that Kamala Harris did, Mayor Willie Brown of San Francisco. It was very influential. That's pretty much the reason why I chose to go to Hastings, because I got into that program. So see if there's any programs like that at any of the schools in your area.
Great. So it looks like we've covered the majority of the questions. I think we can fairly conclude at this point. Great. So we'll be in touch and hope to see people reach out through our website. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Tami.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Great, guys. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, guys. This was super helpful, and I think I will be reaching out to some of you via LinkedIn, but thank you so much for the event. I will definitely be attending any events you guys have going forward.